Health insurance was started in the year 1987 when the Mediclaim policy was rolled out by public sector insurance companies, and that time private sector had not opened up. So, private sector only opened up in the year 2001 and 2. Earlier what used to happen was that the health insurance policy was basically a policy which people used to buy when they used to fall sick. So, it was not a protection policy at all. When the people used to realize that they are about to fall sick or they had fallen sick, that time they used to buy this policy. So, it was not a very popular product and it was not a protection product. So, what happened was that it did not become popular, and it was only until the insurance sector as a whole opened up in 2001 and 2 that the private sector insurance companies realized that this was a good marketing tool in order to enter the corporates insurance sector. What they did was that they started subsidizing the health insurance policy in order to get other premiums of fire, marine, etc. And typically a health insurance policy was sometimes even given free of cost or was heavily subsidized in order to get policies where premiums were much higher, and at that point of time they were tariffed, and health insurance was at that point of time not tariffed, and therefore the premiums could be lowered or were lowered rather to such an extent in order to accommodate other policies. And that is how the private sector started making their roadmaps into the world of insurance, and they started eating into the pie of public sector insurance companies' business share. This is how typically how I amalgamate health insurance, how it helped the private sector insurance companies open up doors when they started operating in India. The sector at that point of time was only 400 crores as far as premiums were concerned when we talk about health insurance. This was a mix of both individual insurance and corporate insurance share. So, it was not I would say the beginning of health insurance, because health insurance opened up in 87, but this was the era when health insurance was marketed to very nicely to all these corporate groups, and also they realized that in case if they have to make a dent in public sector insurance companies, they started offering better commissions to agents, brokers for getting a healthier portfolio. See, what happens in health insurance is that more the portfolio which is younger, the better is the premium versus the claim outgo. So, when the sector opened up, a lot of people who wanted to come to India started scouting for local partners, and they wanted partners with a good distribution channel, and a lot of foreign companies started coming to India, not just for general insurance, but also for life insurance. So, some of the life insurance companies also started selling health as riders at that point of time. That is how I would term the insurance sector when it got started. See, currently there are about 24 insurance companies in India, and there are 4 standalone health insurance companies. Now, everybody for almost 5-7 years we were waiting that the health insurance sector would open up by way of foreign participation. It is only very recently that the government has allowed the FDI to go up from 26% to 49%, and we would see more and more players now coming up and starting their own health insurance companies in India, because all these general insurance companies do not really focus on healthcare as a subject, because health for them is just management of the money which they get from corporates or individuals. So, it is basically just a fund management for them as of now, but the real health insurance will only come in when health insurance companies as standalone insurers would come to India, and currently there are 4, and there are many more who are scouting for local partners to come in. And I would say that the health insurance business is actually the future of insurance in India. Currently, motor has the highest portfolio, but in the earlier times, health insurance was only very negligible part of the overall premiums of insurance companies. Today, it's up to 30% of their entire premiums are basically health insurance premiums. Globally, if we look at health insurance, insurance is still not as popular as it should be. Globally, in all developed countries, health insurance is mandatory at places, somewhere it is contributory. There are a lot of models in health insurance. If we especially look at US, they have a mix of many models. If we look at UK and other countries, yes, there is national health scheme where the entire population is covered by way of government participation. If we look at Thailand, Thailand has also ensured that their entire population is covered through a mix of many schemes. In India, we still have out of pocket expenditure, which is about 70-80% of the healthcare expenditure is out of pocket, and only 30% is through organized sector. As of today, about 30% of our population is insured, which was about 2% in health insurance when the health insurance sector was opening up, and overall including ESIC, including CGHS, including self-funded scheme, it was 10%. So, from about 10% to about 30% is what we have been able to achieve in last one decade. So, for last so many years in so many forums, we had been mentioning that health insurance should be seen as a tool of funding for healthcare in India. Now, if we look at a typical scenario, and the doctors who are the basic caregivers don't want to stay in villages, they don't want to stay in smaller towns, they want to go back to cities, they are looking for better jobs. And nurses, I think we all know that there is a dearth of medical faculty, medical healthcare professionals in India, because everybody is trying to go abroad or come to metros and cities. So, who are the caregivers at these smaller levels, which means towns, cities and villages? One of the basic reason for all these healthcare professionals to have moved out of smaller places was that they were not able to earn adequately. Now, if health insurance is funding the healthcare needs of the local population, more and more doctors would be enticed to stay there in villages or smaller towns or cities, because they know that their payments would be done by the insurance companies and not poor individuals who were sometimes were not even able to pay the fees of the doctors. So, I see that there is a big synergy between the development of healthcare across India and health insurance as a tool to fund it. Now, that we need universal health coverage for our country, I think is a no-brainer, but the format in which it has to be introduced is something which we have to think through. Now, and also in the manner in which it has to be executed. What is happening is that India is a diverse country. There is no health regulator in India. The healthcare delivery in India is fragmented. Now, how do we relate all this? So, there is no body who is currently managing all these schemes under one umbrella, and state happens to be a happens to be a state subject. So, every state has come out with their own schemes, and there is no uniformity in the designing of all these schemes across India. The major scheme which has there in force is Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which I think is going to move from the Labour Ministry to the Health Ministry, so that some of these schemes can be combined under one umbrella. Now, I see that in India, there will be a mix of a few schemes catering to different segments of the society. We could have currently Chief Minister's schemes, Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana schemes. we could have individual health insurance, corporate insurance, and many more products which are introduced by health insurers. I think it will be a mix of all these schemes put together, but then I think the segmentation of the society would eventually decide what kind of scheme we have to introduce for a particular segment of the society, and as per their medical requirements, and also as per the geographical location. The cost of healthcare in smaller towns and cities is still much lower as compared to metros and larger cities because of tertiary care facilities which are very costly and unaffordable. In India, which we have seen is that about 2% of the population annually goes below the poverty line, and they have to either borrow or they have to sell their assets in order to fund their healthcare needs. I see it as a big boon for Indians that if this happens, there will be a equal parity, so that the poor would be able to achieve or get tertiary health care, which is only for a privileged few as of today, and only for a certain segment of the society. The public sector beds are usually so full that they are not able to cater to a lot of people who actually need care, primarily because there are no beds, and if there are beds, there are no healthcare professionals. So, I think if we have to achieve universal health care, it has to be an integrated model where the supply of healthcare professionals also has to be looked into, because if we have to deliver healthcare and if it is a government owned scheme, then delivery of healthcare will become a government subject and not just remain a state subject. So, if we have to give parity and equality to the healthcare requirements and the healthcare delivery across India in a similar fashion, we are looking at a huge requirement of healthcare infrastructure being set up at all levels in India. And I think again I would mention that health insurance would be an appropriate tool for setting up the healthcare infrastructure across the country.